The Switch 2 is finally here to give a fresh coat of paint to some of its predecessor's best games, and Tears of the Kingdom is no exception. My name is Tom Marks. I reviewed Tears of the Kingdom back in 2023. We just recently covered some of the updates that the Switch 2 brings to Breath of the Wild. Our very interesting Ogilvy took a look at that, and I spent the weekend playing its sequel and getting a sense of what's new, what's changed, what's been improved. So here's some gameplay of that, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. But before I do that, let's look back at what I said about the original game. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is an unfathomable follow-up to one of the greatest games ever, somehow improving upon it in nearly every way. Be that with simple quality of life improvements, a genuinely exciting story, or wildly creative new building mechanics that make you rethink what's possible. It both revamps old ground and introduces vast new areas so immense it somehow made me wonder if Breath of the Wild was actually all that big. It's loaded with an almost alarming number of tasks to complete, mysteries to discover, and delightful distractions to keep you from ever reaching that place you naively thought you were headed. Nintendo has followed up a triumph with a triumph, expanding and evolving a world that already felt full beyond expectation, and raising the bar even higher into the clouds. I gave it a 10 out of 10, like you saw there, and boy, do I stand by that. I still think Tears of the Kingdom is just a fantastic game, and that is one thing that stood out to me playing it this weekend on Switch 2 is, wow, I kind of missed this. I missed all the little things that I hadn't finished up, and I found myself getting lost in it again. But one thing I didn't get lost in is definitely one of the biggest game changers that the Switch 2 edition brings to Tears of the Kingdom, and this is kind of maybe weird, is HDR. HDR makes such a huge difference when you're exploring the depths in this game. HDR obviously makes the lighting across the board look better, and you have to have an HDR TV if you're playing in docked mode to do this, but it's kind of nuts how much of a game changer this is and how much it makes a difference in the depths, because things that were pitch black before are now pretty visible, and there's still that sort of, if you will, advanced darkness in places that you haven't lit up with light routes, where you really are not meant to see what's going on unless you are actively lighting them up yourself. That's still there, so it's not like suddenly the entire depths is just illuminated with HDR, but the areas that are already lit up with a light route but more dim, sort of on the edges of that stuff or a little further away from other light sources, you can see that stuff way more clearly now. That doesn't show up quite as much in the actual gameplay capture, but filming the screen, you can really see what I'm talking about here in the difference of HDR on or HDR off. It is, I mean, to be cheeky, night and day. It quite frankly is, and it makes exploring the depths just a lot easier, not like trivially easy. There's still that challenge, that danger that's there that I really liked about the base game, but it just makes it less frustrating running into things when you feel like you shouldn't be, when you feel like you've already explored an area or sort of know where you're going already. And then when you get deeper out into uncharted territory, that experience of mapping the unknown is still there as well. Another nice thing about the Switch version is that nothing lags anymore. This was true of Breath of the Wild as well, but there used to be, it was never terrible, but there used to be plenty of little moments where things would slow down, things would hitch, you would get into a big confrontation while it was raining and thunderstorm and all this stuff, and then it would just kind of lag a bit. I mentioned this in my base review, and it distracted occasionally. It just was a problem. All of that's gone. It's really lovely to see both in handheld and docked at 4K that it just runs how it should have run from the beginning. That's the best way to put it, is this feels like what it should have been. That's especially true when you're diving really far distances really fast. So, you could usually dive from the sky to the ground really quickly without any hitching, but if you went straight from the tippy top of the sky right after a fast travel and dove straight down into a pit all the way to the ground, at some point usually the game would stop for a moment to load what was coming, what you were about to see. That's gone now in any practical sense. I imagine speedrunners will still run into it as they zip across the sky in ways that weren't necessarily intended, but in a practical sense, you're not going to run into that in the way that you might have very occasionally in the base game. One place that frame rate being quicker is really buttery smooth and nice too is also in building. And that's, one of the things that Tears of the Kingdom has over Breath of the Wild is this whole building system. And occasionally when you brought up your Zonai tablet abilities, that could kind of lag if there were a lot of particle effects or there's a lot of effects going on when you were moving things around, building, all of that stuff could eventually hitch. Building in this game is buttery smooth as well. And that's really nice to see that pretty much anywhere you saw any sort of issues are just smoothed over. They're just resolved. One thing that's also been added with the Switch 2 edition, if you have the Nintendo app, there's a couple of things that have been added to both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and, they share those improvements. Things like the audio logs, where when you're walking around with your phone open, you can find these audio logs in special locations where maybe Zelda will say a little thing or tell you a little story about a thing. Those are cute little moments. They're not wildly substantial, but they're nice to have. There's also item sharing as part of that, which is neat. But also, for Tears of the Kingdom specifically, you can now share builds. You can share building creations that you have by saving your build as a QR code and then sharing it with people, and then you can scan other QR codes and download those schematics straight into your game. And that's neat. I think that's a nice feature. The thing that I don't like about it is that there's no sort of built-in hub as part of this to find creations. So it's really easy to just send your friend a QR code or have a friend send you a QR code. But unless you're actively seeking things out online for people sharing QR codes that have these special builds, you're not getting any benefit from it. And I know that might be like a silly complaint to be like, oh, you actually have to go use the system, but I really would have loved to have seen something. A lot of games with creation tools and sharing tools like this will have a little library where you can find QR codes from other people really easily and see, oh, these are the top voted QR codes or whatever. These are some really cool builds that a lot of people like. And there's just nothing like that there. So you're really going to have to go onto, some sort of social media platform or forum or something like that and seek out the builds you're looking for, which I think is going to hurt how much it actually gets used quite a bit compared to if it had something like that built into the system. Another nice improvement that Tears of the Kingdom also shares with Breath of the Wild is the load times. The load times are insanely fast now, pretty much across the board. I think the best evidence of how crazy the load times are is when you were doing a loading screen in the base game on Switch 1, it would show the map, right? And your little icon would blip out, and then the map would move over to wherever you were fast traveling to, and then it would blip back in. The load times are so quick now that you don't even barely get the blip out. It's like your icon will disappear and then the game loads into wherever you were going. So it's actually so fast that a cute little thing that was making the load times less obnoxious in the base game is now not even functional in this version because it's so fast. And that's a trade I'm willing to take, right? Like I would much rather have the load times than that little animation. It's just so funny that they had to put that into the Switch 1 version, and now the Switch 2 edition is so quick, you don't even have to worry about it. You won't even know that that's a thing if this is your first time playing the game. Another thing that's true and another thing that's stuck with me playing this is, man, I still really am enjoying it, whether it's your first time or you're coming back to it. I think this is a great way to re-experience this game. But I wanted to take this last moment as a PSA of, this is also a great time if you haven't yet, please beat Tears of the Kingdom. And I know that's like a weird ask. Breath of the Wild, its ending was fine if you beat that one. It was sort of just a little capstone on an otherwise open-ended game, and it didn't, the ending was okay. The ending of this game and the story in general is so good. It's so crazy, and I'm not going to spoil anything here, but it is so worth seeing. It is a spectacle. It is it's probably one of my favorite final boss fights in a Zelda game. It is a really, really insane story twist in terms of what's going on and what you have to do. If you got somewhat far in the game, you probably kind of already know what's going on, but yeah, it really, really impressed me, and it worries me that probably a lot of people out there got really far in Tears of the Kingdom, had a ton of fun finding all of the shrines, and assumed that the end was basically just like the end of Breath of the Wild and they didn't really need to see it. The Switch 2 edition of this is the perfect time to reacquaint yourself with the game and then beat it if you haven't already, because the end is seriously, seriously, seriously worth seeing.
Stand with me. I need all your aid.
So yeah, those are my impressions of Tears of the Kingdom based on just, a weekend spending some time running around, rediscovering the depths, completing some shrines I missed. I didn't 100% it because that game is just so incredibly huge, even over 100+ hours, and I was still not actually fully done with it, right? But it was a blast, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I was gonna dip back in with the Switch 2 launch, but it runs so well, it looks so good at high res and high frame rate, the HDR is so impressive that I think I'm probably going to spend a decent amount more time diving back into Tears of the Kingdom now, which is not necessarily something I expected to say going into this review update. I'm still working on my full review of the actual Switch 2 console. That'll be coming out probably later this week, so you can keep an eye out for that. We've got a review of Welcome Tour and Mario Kart World as well that you can check out. And yeah, if you want more of Switch 2, we've got a few more of these updates coming. And for everything else, keep it right here on IGN.